Well, good day wherever you're joining us from. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Always look to deliver value to help you negotiate a better life. And you're in for a treat today. We're going to be talking with Jason Yarusi about negotiating a purposeful life to build a multi-million-dollar empire. So you get the best of both worlds. If you're looking for a little finance and a lot of purpose, you've come to the right place today. So welcome, Jason. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Cindy. Thank you for having me.
And for those of you who may not know him, Jason, he's an active real estate syndicator and investor. He manages a fund of over $300 million. He hosts the Multifamily Live podcast, and he's the founder of the Multifamily Live Club. Beyond real estate, he's an avid ultra runner and workout enthusiast, and he also does a lot of work around helping people live into their purpose and embrace life fully. And we're going to be digging into a little bit of both of those. And more importantly to him, he's, a very loving father to three amazing kids and a great husband. So Jason, you've got this interesting split, right? Or a double facet approach, if you will, to business. You've got this successful real estate syndication investment, but also, I would call it a personal development empire. So how did you come to focus on both of those and reconcile them?
I think it started with me working on myself, right? Because for many years I was doing everything wrong. I was making really bad decisions. I had a lot of loss in my formative years, and that really put me in a downward spiral where I didn't have much positivity in my life, and I was very lonely in my own realm. Even if I had friends around, I just felt really lost in my universe, right? So went to college really just without a lot of direction, and ended up picking a major, and I got a finance degree, and just left college with thought of like, what am I doing with this? I don't want anything to do with this. And so I moved to New York City, and I just started working very odd jobs, right? So working in bars, restaurants, just picking up things, just like letting things happen to me in life instead of just actually choosing to take hold of life.
Yeah.
And I did that for a number of years, 5, 6, 7 years, where I was just really unhappy, really angry, and blaming everyone around me, right? So I was putting a lot of emphasis on, hey, it was everybody else's fault, right? So
Yep.
it was that person's fault, the cat's fault, my upbringing, my parents, my schooling, like anything around me, it was someone else's fault. And I remember I was leaving from work one night in New York City. It was 2, 3 in the morning, just hating where I was, hating everything that was around me. And I got on my bike, I rode across Manhattan, I made a right on Second Avenue, and out of nowhere, a car came out and hit me, and I
Oh,
flew into the
Jesus.
air. And I came to, got up, and I got pulled out of the street by some kids that were French, because they were speaking French, pulled me
Yeah.
out of the street, and got in the ambulance, taken to the hospital. I had got stitches in my chin, the back of my head, a broken shoulder, and a pin in my wrist. And all I could think about was, whoa, I have to get back to work because I need to make rent. And there was this moment of like calm where I just had this pause where I was like, okay, let's hold on a second. You hate where you are, you don't like what you're doing, and all you want to do is anything away from what you're doing. And now you get hit by a car, and all you can think about is getting back to this job that you don't want to be at. And there was this moment where I was like, okay, listen, if I'm going to continue to do crazy, chaotic things, I can't be upset with the results, because I'm choosing to do these things that I don't want to do, and I'm not happy with it. So either take it or change something.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that the next day was like this magical epiphany, but I just started to make some small changes. And lo and behold, right? So stop drinking at night, start to get up earlier, start to have more of a workout routine, start taking some information that was positive, start to read some books, start to do little things. And these little things started to snowball into more productivity and more positivity. So I went from working in bars to actually opening up my own bar, and I opened up a restaurant in New York City. I opened and sold a brewery in New York City. And that led me into the world of really entrepreneurship in his own light, but just
Yeah.
creating businesses. So I went out and helped my dad really scale his construction business in New Jersey before moving into real estate. And what I found was that everything I've come with is that I had to get back to me, right? So we talk about negotiation here, and it was that I was constantly negotiating myself what
Yeah.
not to do, right? Oh,
Yeah.
tomorrow would always be a better day, maybe next week or next month, and
Yeah.
you can do that for years, right?
Yes.
Today's not the right timing. I'll choose to do in a week, or when I read this next book, or when I go take this next course, or when I meet this special someone. And I was doing that for so long, and now I found that the actions I've taken, although it's not always perfect, it's rarely perfect, it at least continues to guide me along the
Yeah.
way. And that positive training in my mind has allowed me to grow and scale, and now go and really accomplish what we've done in the real estate format. But then when people ask, like, how did you start to make change? I started to look back on the steps I take, and it had a path that I I really had to be self-aware with
Yeah.
how I was showing up, and just saying I wasn't showing up right. I wasn't showing up well in the morning. I was taking things the wrong way, and I was being critical, and I was not taking good advice, and I was not taking action. And then I had to start positioning myself for a better future. And slowly but surely, it started to create more positive momentum, which has led us to where we are today.
Wow. I did not know that about the accident. I mean, it's interesting as you were saying that, it reminded me too, Brendan Burchard, right? I mean, total epiphany for him as well when he had a motor vehicle accident, was hit. I think he was cycling and
Oh,
uh, yeah, and ended up having the accident, totally changed, and now he's one of the leading personal development people as well. And I want to unpack for our listeners. There was so much there as well. I love when you're saying about that. Oh, tomorrow or next week or when I get this. I speak a lot about that. I call that the 1 day mindset. Right? When this happens, then I'll be able to. When this happens. And I really just wanted to give a shout out to you, Jason, and raise it as an awareness for our listeners out there. You really are embodying everything that, I call the art of feminine negotiation, because obviously you're super in touch with your masculine. And yet I so appreciate you showing up here with that vulnerability and transparency and sharing your story and taking ownership for all the bad decisions you made. We're so conditioned not to do that. And I think that when we can tap into that and be honest about it, that's when things start to really change, and taking that 100% responsibility for our lives. So I want to talk about, both the real estate negotiation aspect and the purpose-driven life. But what you said made me really want to start with the mindset piece, because I often say negotiating our mindsets our first and most important negotiation. So obviously you really conquered that and continue to work at that with intention. So what advice would you have for our listeners on negotiating our mindset so we can show up more powerfully, get more of what we want in life?
just understand it's constantly a work in progress.
Yeah.
And each day it's that same fears, doubts, they try to creep in. But the more we can set up our barricades, the
Yeah.
easier it is for us to turn up in a better light. And you want to bring positivity into the morning, and create controls, right? And like, I get up early, but like, say you get up at 10, whatever time you get up, you have to create controls in your morning, because many times I see people that their day is reckless because they start reckless, right?
Yeah.
They maybe get up and they hit the snooze button 3 or 4 times, and now they're rushed. Maybe they get out of bed, they stub their toe, they rush down, they get showered, they run down, they grab something poor to eat because they're in a rush. They get into their car, they get stuck in traffic. Now they're angry, and then now they get to work and there's fire after fire, and they get
Yeah.
to the end of the day, they take a trip home, they're in traffic, and now they're sitting down at the end of the night, they're watching Netflix, drinking a beer, and they're like, oh, never again. And then the same thing repeats the
Yeah.
next day, and the next day, and the next day.
Yeah.
And what I found is that my morning is not perfect, but I get up and I take a moment where I get up, I drink a glass of water. I do 5 to 10 minutes. It's usually 6 to 11 minutes of meditation through an app. I will go work out, and then I will come back, and typically Peter, my wife, will get up, and now she'll go do her thing while I'll start to hang with the kids for a couple minutes, and I'll just have that moment of
Yeah.
pause. And so when I come to work, or when I go to do some activity and that fire kicks up, I've already created my win for the morning. And
Yeah.
now I have my head on straight, that I can go put my focus onto it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you find that you have more calm to situations, because I used to just constantly be in reaction mode, right? I was just reacting at all times. And when you're reacting, everything seems like a fire, and you constantly feel under the gun. And we deal with some big projects here, so there can be some stressful moments. But the more I can pause and ask myself, okay, is this a momentary stress, or is this something that I really have to put all my focus and
Yeah.
awareness into? And when I find that, it makes decision making easier, and it makes my preparation easier. And so if you can ask yourself, like, what are 2 things or 3 things I can do that it almost prepares me, right? You think about, like superheroes get their costume on, or like,
Yeah.
or certain people do their certain training, or you see
Yeah.
like someone who is in basketball, they go to a free throw line, they have that certain rhythm they do each one. Like,
Yeah.
what is that training that can get you in the mold each and every day, just to be ready? It could be going in there and saying affirmations in a mirror. It could be,
Yeah.
changing up and brushing brushing your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed, just to open your mind up. Like, what is it that you do that can just set your stage each and every day? And it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
big, but it just has to be, okay, now I'm good. Let's
Yeah.
go.
I love that. And it's just about being intentional, right? Rather than we're almost like rats in the maze, everything we are conditioned to do society with all our to do agendas. as opposed to recognizing the power of a pause. And, when we give ourselves the grace and space, sometimes it also allows for new ideas to flow in that we would otherwise have been spinning our wheels for hours or days or weeks or never get there without it. And I want to really put a pin for our listeners as well. Notice that Jason started with that positivity piece. And I know it can feel like it's hard these days with the media floating all the negativity, but we can't control everything that happens in the world. We can't control a lot of the external, but we can control what we choose to let in, what thoughts we choose to focus on, what meaning we attach to those thoughts. So I love that you really push that positivity thing. And I embrace for our listeners out there who maybe are feeling a little overwhelmed or feeling like everything's going to hell in a handbasket in the world, just take a moment to look around you and find some things you can be grateful for and find that positivity, as Jason was saying. Now, how do you think, Jason, we can enhance our self-awareness? I think so many of us are just in that sort of robotic, conditioned model. Any tips on how we can elevate our self-awareness?
Yeah, I do want to touch on the one thing you just said right there is
Yeah,
that, my mom, she would say to me, like, I wish the news would just stop scaring me. And I would say, well, just turn off the news.
yeah,
Because most of the time, like, the ad dollars are driven by negativity because that gets more eyeballs. And so the more we feed into that, right,
yeah,
that we have to constantly be in the know, or the more we're constantly heightened in just
yeah,
all of the elements happen out there. But most of them have no effect onto us, right? We're in an
yeah,
election cycle now, and regardless of where you fall in the
yeah,
parts, you can find energy that's either pulling you or pushing you from where you are.
yeah,
And you want to find energy that you want to be pulled forward with, not pushed into, because
yeah.
many times we take negativity and fear and we have it push us, right? And that
Yes.
constantly is like we feel like our back is against the wall, but we want to find good energies that pull us, right? And that could be
Yeah,
anything. It could be reading a book, it could be having a conversation with a friend, it could be Bible study. You could have all these different things that are good energies pulling you forward.
yeah,
And what I found with self-awareness is like, I go back to like the Knights of the Round Table. I used to love like reading stories about knights, and
yeah,
like all of them came together. It was all different people, right? It wasn't just knights, it was all common people. They came together to hopefully push off war into the future. And when we
yeah,
can think about our mind, right? Our mind is constantly at war because we have all these different elements, and it could be kindness, it could be gluttony, right? It could be,
yeah,
hatred, it could be empathy, right? You have all these different feelings in your mind. And what I like to look at is that I had a friend say this once, is that it's hard to see ourselves when we're stuck in a jar and we can't see the label. And when
Mm,
you look and you just take yourself
good.
outside of where you are and just ask yourself, like, how am I reacting in the moment? Like, someone just cut me off, right? Does that just ruin my day?
Yeah,
Right. And if you look at that and say, okay, it ruined my day. Well, what if I like reframe that and said, okay, that person just cut me off. Well, maybe their wife's pregnant, or
yeah,
maybe they just found out their mother-in-law just got hit by a car and just got
yeah,
rushed to the hospital, or maybe they just have this very important meeting and somehow something's happened, they've been stuck in traffic. What if we just turn it around from us all the time and put the emphasis outward, and
yeah,
we can start acting ourselves like, in this moment when I'm acting with rage, what if I acted just with awe and just love or just kindness? And when you ask yourself the opposite of the effect, you can start understanding how you're showing up,
yeah,
because it's said very, very simply that we can control what we do and we can control how we react to what's done to us. And I was reacting horribly to what was happening to me, whether it was justified or not, right, over time, until I decided not to. Right. I had to go talk to one of our companies, some of our employees today. And I was like, I thought of it after. I was like, I would have handled that very poor about a decade ago. I would
yeah,
have gone and been very angry and handled that in a very
yeah,
different light. And I had a conversation today that was productive in its own realm because I've learned from my mistakes.
yeah.
And until we decide to show up and learn how we're showing up, it's going to be hard for us to break the patterns that we're stuck in right now.
I love that. And it's really at its core, in some ways, it's about empathy, right? And as you were saying that about, maybe someone just found out that they're on the way to the hospital. I had my epiphany on that about 30 years ago. And, my dad died unexpectedly at only 52 years old of a heart attack. And on the way to the hospital, it was pouring rain and I'm looking around at everybody going about their business and thinking, and all of a sudden it clicked for me,
Oh,
my
wow.
God, on any given day, somebody that you pass might be
Yeah.
dealing with an absolute crisis. So just why not tell ourselves a different story? If somebody's being an
Mhm.
ass, instead of saying, "Oh, that person's such an ass," it's like, okay, what empathy can I bring to the table to this? What story can I tell myself to have this interaction be different? I love that. Now,
Yeah.
how do
It's
we
like if you
quiet?
see two people yelling, if one person just stops yelling and just
Yes.
literally talks in a very monotone voice, it's hard for that other person to keep yelling, right? Because
Yeah.
they at a certain point they just can't keep it. But if you
Yeah.
heighten it with it, then everybody's yelling. But if you
Yeah.
bring it back down, it's hard for them to continue on that pace because it's no longer that drive or that energy from the other person.
I love that. And I right, it's very counterintuitive and people think I'm crazy, but I find that's a really effective strategy if you're negotiating with bullies and they're
Mhm.
ranting. And I ascribe qualities to them that are sort of aspirational. I'm like, I know that treating people with dignity and respect is really important to you.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
while they're appearing in the opposite frame, and almost always it takes them a second, but then you can see everything recalibrating and all of a sudden it triggers reciprocity and they get a little more respectful. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of us suffer from that inner critic, right? So, any thoughts on how we can quiet that inner critic that stops us from stepping into our full power?
So with my little kids, I mean, I remember just growing up and just constantly having, just doubt. Like my parents, they did their best, but they struggled a lot in the
Yeah,
small family business. So they
yeah,
constantly looked at, money or other people in just a way that constantly brought negativity. And I've
yeah,
been trying to reframe that energy for my kids because I fall into that pattern.
yeah,
Like that's my natural pattern that I've learned to fall into. And so it's been a pattern for me to break free of. But I've been trying to put positivity into my kids in the morning, just talking in words. And where it comes to is it's your wording to yourself. And they say that, you would never talk to anybody else like your mind
yeah.
talks to you.
That's true.
And when you can think about that, you say like, why am I really this awful? No.
Yeah,
Take your words out and start putting positivity in your words. Like, I can do this. I will do this. Why not me? And when you ask those questions, you start to realize that you have everything you need, just like anybody else. The only difference may be that they've acted upon what they have, and you're just waiting to act upon it
yeah,
until you start acting upon it now. So the true motion of your inner critic is it's always going to be there. And sometimes it's good because sometimes you want it there to
yeah,
give you the opposite effect. Because if not, we would just be running doing wild stuff all the time,
yeah,
right? So for us to have it there, but it's to use it as almost our panel and not the final judge, right?
yeah,
Because we use it to the point where the inner critic will always tell you you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, you're not smart
yeah,
enough, you're not loving enough, you're not all of these things. But you
yeah,
can use that as a counterpart for you to say, okay, is it a feeling I'm having right now, or is the truth? And
yeah,
when you can break apart a feeling from the truth, you start
yeah,
to understand that it's really just a feeling in your mind that you can break
yeah.
free from, but you have to choose to act.
Yeah. I love that you started answering the question talking about that sort of baggage from your childhood because and as you said it totally resonated with me because we grew up in a little rental apartment, money was always an issue. And I think so much of that inner critic in many ways, as you were saying, and it struck me, it comes from that scarcity mindset rather than, even on the love, right? There's only so much love to go around and I'm not lovable enough. We question it. There's only so much money to be made. And there's not
Mm.
enough of the pie as opposed to expanding that there's all the love in the world, right? There's all the riches in the world and taking that abundance approach. I love that. And how do we start the journey? We often hear if we want our life to change, then we need to change. Any suggestions for our listeners there who are like, this sounds great, but how do I kickstart this journey?
I would put down today, and it's almost like you can do a SWOT analysis for your life, right? But you can look at your strengths and your weaknesses, and it just gets back to you being self-aware, but then position yourself for greatness, right? So if right now your action, your mentality is to never act, right? You have to look at it and say, okay, well, the world's constantly revolving around us, right? So everything's going to continue to change around us, or whether we're not going to change or we are going to change. So ask yourself, what are your strengths, right?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm very outgoing. I'm very creative, right? Okay, what are my weaknesses? I'm not analytical on that part. Okay, so what are my goals, right? What are the goals I want? And then we can break down actionable tasks to get to the goals. So like if the goal is to start a business or the goal is to make $1 million or the goal is to
yeah,
meet that special someone, where we get lost upon the journey is that we get so caught onto the goal that we forget about the goal is just like it's a mile marker out there, but it's not the pinnacle moment. And we
yeah,
get so lost in the goal. And so I'll give you an example is that I've run some long distance races. So I ran a 100-mile race a couple times. And if I was to think about it, like the first
wow,
step, like, oh, I only have to go 99.9 more miles, my mind would be like, oh, forget it.
yeah,
Let's just give up now, right? Forget
yeah,
it. Like that's it, right? But that's how we think about our goals, right? It's in the New Year's resolution effect. There's no foundation, right?
yeah,
So we start and we fail ultimately because 92% of New Year's resolutions fail because there's no reasoning behind it or no action. And so what I would find is that I didn't know how to run 100 miles. I'd run a bunch of marathons of other parts. I said, okay, so what can I control? I was like, okay, I can get up every day and run 6 miles.
Yeah.
And I'll just do that. I just run 6 miles, whether it was hot, whether it was freezing out, when my ear hurts, I was sick, just I would run 6 miles.
Yeah.
So when I got into that race, I said, okay, well, I don't know how to run 100 miles, but let me see if I can just run to the first aid station. It's about
Yeah.
5 or 6 miles. I did that. Let me just see if I can do that again. Okay, I run to the next aid station. And now let me just see, oh, it's getting a little tough. Well, okay, am I too tough for me to quit? Well, let's not quit. Let's just see if I get to that next aid station and then I
Yeah.
can figure it out again. If I really want to stop, then I can have that conversation. And then maybe it gets tough. I can run another 500 feet, or I run to the bridge, or I run through the tunnel, and then maybe it's another 200 feet. And lo and behold, I got to 100 miles through a series of actions. And that's typically what it comes for us to get outside of our comfort zone, is that
Yeah.
it's not the last step, it's the first step that matters. And because when you take that first step to your goal, right, you start to uncover usually one of four things. One, you're like, this is absolutely horrible. Okay, well then don't do it. Go find another goal. If this is the
Yeah.
or it's the wrong way.
Yeah.
Okay, well turn around. Or you're kind of on the right way, and now you have direction of how you need to pivot to get the right way, or you're ultimately on the right path. So if you think about it today, okay, I want to make $1 million. Okay, doing what? What does it want to make $1 million doing? Oh, I want to, sell weighted blankets. Okay. Where can I find a site that's selling weighted blankets, right? Like you can start
Yeah.
breaking it back into actionable tasks. And because you can't control the $1 million coming, but you can control the
Yeah.
tasks. Like you can't control like, oh, I want to meet the love of my life, but you can start controlling how you start to show up, right? You can start controlling the little task. And when you find that, it becomes rewarding because you're not stuck on the $1 million. You're stuck on, oh, I need to, I'm going to sell weighted blankets. Okay. Well, I need to make 20 sales calls this week.
Yeah.
Okay, did I make 20 sales calls? Not the result of the sales calls, but did I do that? And then you can start tracking your actions, and that can feel successful because now the success is in the action and
Yeah.
not the result.
That's good. Gosh, when I'd said you're an ultra runner, I had no idea. 100 miles. It just about took my breath away, even just thinking about it there. And oh my gosh, what a gorgeous metaphor for everything in our life. That I love that. Just get to the next aid station, right? And it's about enjoying the journey. Again, that sort of to-do tat, got this goal, I got this goal. And and I was guilty of that. Even when I'd had my epiphany, Jason, and made the switch, after 30 years as a social justice attorney, everything's,
Wow.
go, 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 high adrenaline. And then I decided I wanted to start this sort of on purpose kind of life, coaching business. And I was so focused on the goal that I was bringing that same energy that I brought to the practice of law into this. And I finally had my epiphany that
Oh, wow.
it's the journey. Like enjoy none of this is worth it if I don't enjoy the journey. So now
Yeah,
tell us about your Live 100 program and like how
sure.
can we use it to negotiate our best lives?
I'll add in a thing about weight loss is that, where weight loss fails a lot, right, is that people get so stuck on the destination,
Yeah.
right? But they forget who they need to become
Yeah.
at that part. And so like, so say you see people who lose weight, they'll gain it back, they'll lose weight, they'll gain
Yeah.
it back, because what they forget to say is that you do these things to drop, like say you need to lose 30 pounds, right? Or like your goal is to lose 30 pounds. Well, you go and you go into this calorie deficit, like you barely eat, you work out 10 times. It's just stuff that
Yeah.
it's not the life you're going to live, right? It's what you're doing for the moment. And so when they get to that, they don't know how to react as that person who's lost 30 pounds. So we have to
Yeah.
think about ourselves in our new light, right? We have to envision ourselves like not where we are today, but where we want to be. Like
Yeah.
the decisions I'm making right now, the steps I'm doing right now, is this the person that I will be into the future?
Mm.
And if not, what's the difference between me and that person? Because you need
Yeah.
to start showing up with those people. Because the
Yeah.
person that loses 30 pounds and then learns how to live their life, learns how to still be active, learns how to enjoy life, but not, go back to eating, like a box of donuts a day, like who just needs to go in there and, oh, maybe they have a
Yeah.
donut with their child on Thursdays, right? Or something, but they learn to live the life that they wanted to have for the goal of the weight loss.
Yeah.
But so many times we don't look at our future selves and ask who we want to be. And then the result happens, but we don't know how to act. And then ultimately it goes back to where we started, and then we have
That's
to figure
true.
it out again.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
And so with Live 100, it's a series of, really three foundational blocks. It's breaking your habits so you can start to build momentum,
Yeah.
so you can magnify the results and the success that you deserve to
Yeah.
have. And with that first block being self-awareness, is that, we have self-awareness, we have position yourself for greatness, right? And then taking action. And what you look at this is that we have these habits. And there's some that are good for us, and there's some that may have served us in the past but no longer serve us, right? And then
Yeah.
there's some that are not good for us.
Yeah.
And you typically, you don't stop and just say, oh, today I don't do this habit anymore. You replace it with something else. So you have to ask yourself, like, the person I want to be, what are the habits I need to start doing today to replace the habits that I don't want?
Yeah.
And you slowly but surely start to implement the plan of just putting in habits that are going to serve your future self.
Yeah.
And along that way, you'll start to have, mastering habits and rituals that are going to serve that person, and then being uncomfortably brave to what's to come, because we're all usually scared of what's ahead. Sometimes we're scared of failing, but sometimes
Yeah.
we're scared of success, right? We're
Yeah.
scared
That's
of
so true.
having the success that we want, because it could be either way. But when you look at that, you have to be brave to the circumstances, because all of your growth is breaking through where you are and where you're stuck.
Yeah.
And what I've found many times is that it's so funny. I work with people, and that, the things that we were facing, that were these things we'll never get over, right? That we'll never get through these parts, a year or 2 years ago, are now little speed bumps. They don't even remember them,
Yeah.
right?
So
And now
true.
we're on to our next, Mount Everest that we'll never get over. And then a month from now, right, it will be just a little speed bump or something we
Yeah.
don't remember, because usually in our mind, we make these things so impossible to get over, right? But if you ask yourself, is this something I'm even going to remember 5 years from now?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then just
Yeah.
let it go right now and
Yeah.
just get by it, right? But if it's something major, right? Okay, then how are we going to get through it right now?
Yeah.
Because usually 95% of the time, like it's Seneca says, we suffer more in our mind than in reality, right? It's that part of us, we suffer so much right now on
Yeah.
things that either never come true, or honestly, we will never remember.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. I mean, and it's so much of it circles back to that self-awareness we were talking about, right? Like
Right.
starting to get intentional.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite words, because I think it changes everything. When we don't let life happen to us, we just get more intentional about choosing who we want to be. What do we want to feel? How do we want to experience this moment right now? Now, we were talking before we actually got online here today about success and how we've been conditioned to define success based on these certain parameters that may not serve us well. I'd be interested. How do you measure success, Jason?
So I've tried to make it very simple in my own thought process, is that monetary, we've been happy with where we're going, but I look at it more upon our kids, is that when I pass on, it's going to be that I'm going to leave things with my children to not really make them choose a result, but inform them in proper decision-making tactics that they'll be able to go and make good decisions in the future.
Yeah.
And so I wish it was more of a concrete statement, but I want to prepare my kids that when faced with adversity, which will happen,
Yeah.
that they're prepared to make good decisions based on
Yeah.
what they've learned in the past. And for myself, it's constantly something I'm working on, right? And I look at decisions I'm making, and you can't go back and unmake it, but you can say, okay, was that the best decision for the moment?
Yeah.
And I've gotten more conditioned at taking a pause where, I'll act quickly because I've been working scenarios through my head
Yeah.
overall. And so I look at success as that, now, we live here in Tennessee. I have my wife, our three kids. We've have a small farm now. We've continued to make a life that we looked at, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, about items that we wanted, that we said, okay, here's the direction we're going, and now they're showing up because we've continued to put the energy into them,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
with that, it gives me the opportunity to say, okay, so what's that next opportunity we want to do? And what you find is that with part of Live 100, it's allowed us to show other people that, okay, you can go out there and put yourself into the universe and find that if you give out there in the universe, a lot of things that you want to have
Yeah.
happen, because it's not so stuck that I need this, is that I can come help others. And with helping others, more shows up than you would ever expect.
Yeah. So true. It's funny. We talked about the power of the pause, and there's such power in service, right? Coming from a place of service, you can get so much back. And also ties back to what we were talking about, that abundance, right? Because when you approach life with this abundance mindset that I've got lots to give, and when you
Mm.
do it without expectations, then things tend to ripple back. And also,
I'll
I love
get
this, you were saying that it's about ownership, right? Like taking ownership for the things we've done wrong, not making excuses, no blame and or shame, frankly, Sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, so when we first got into buying apartment communities, and I had just bought my first one, and I was in New Jersey, and we had brought a 94 unit apartment building in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I was like, it'd be good to get around other people that were doing this. But in New Jersey, there was like all these different meetings that were like all different forms of real estate, but nothing that was really targeting what I was doing. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's just start a meeting talking about buying apartment buildings with just no, like there was no thing I wanted from it. It was just want to get
Yeah.
around other people and just tell them what we're doing and doing. And like the most fantastic thing happened is that, that grew from like we had like 25 people at the first meeting, it grew to like 3,000 members. It was
Wow.
this huge group, and all of a sudden people were out there going from like, leaving their job to go buy apartment buildings, like getting together in these different teams, like going to
Yeah.
change the direction of life. And then from that, there was no ask there, but I started to have investors invest with us. There's
Yeah.
all these things happened from me saying, it'd be interesting. Why don't we create a meeting with other like-minded people?
Yeah.
And when you do that, you don't know what's going to come. And so that's the thing, is that don't 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 choose the result,
Yeah.
in your mind
Yeah.
before you let the process happen.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Being open to, because sometimes it's what we think we want is
Right.
actually, there's something better than what we think we want. And
Yeah.
I find that even in the practice of law for so long, you've got a client thinking they want this and the other party thinks they want this. And most lawyers, sadly, have them all fighting and battling it out. And everybody feels completely brutalized by the process. When had they come with a more open, collaborative approach to just finding a best outcome, as you say, without expectations to a particular result, there's something better for everybody there. I love that insight. Now, speaking of your real estate experience, what do you think makes you an effective negotiator in your sort of real estate syndication work?
Two parts is I would say I'm patiently aggressive in my own right. So I know that we have to get to the goal, but I'm also patient for the result to come. And so
Nice.
you find with negotiations is that you of course want to win, but you have to understand there's got to be a reason that this negotiation is going to take place and going to have a positive result. Because if both are so stuck where they want, and
Yeah.
that no one will come to say, okay, let me see it from the other person's side to say, what can I offer that can be helpful from them, but that can also still give me the opportunity to
Yeah.
benefit from what I want. And when you look at that from both sides, you can ask yourself if the negotiation in your mind is being reasonable.
Yeah.
And because usually if we come here just, a bull in a china shop and try to force the narrative,
Yeah.
that's where negotiations typically fall short or fail, right? And no one gets the result, because there has to be some win in each other's mind, right?
Yeah.
And many times in real estate, it's also understanding that I can't think for the other person, but I have to understand what
Yeah.
their wants are,
Yeah.
because it's not always price driven, which everyone thinks it may be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where you can win on price and you can win on terms. Is that
Yes.
I may be able to get my price if I can give them their terms.
Yeah.
And that can be a beneficial
Yeah.
arrangement for all parties. And
Yeah.
so it could be that, oh, they want this price. Okay, but I'm going to pay you over the course of 10 years. And that could be a negotiation where we could both win, because if I map out really just the process of those payments, it works to the structure of my deal. Where if I gave them their price today, it wouldn't work for me. And for them, they may say, well, I just wanted my price over 10 years. Doesn't matter. Man, it
Yeah.
takes less of a tax implication. So
Yeah.
understanding both parties of how you can utilize what is wanted for both allows you to potentially come up for an arrangement that may suit both parties.
Yeah, I love that. And it comes back again to when we were saying empathy, right? Truly seeking to understand what the other party wants. Because
Mhm.
we always assume it's just about the money. And that's not the, I remember a real estate deal we did one time. And I just had that intuitive hit. The guy had built the house himself. He was older now. His kids were growing. He was having to let it go. They had this massive estate up on sort of this prime property. And unbeknownst to us at the time, we were up against a big development company that wanted the property,
Oh,
right, to
wow.
build a resort or whatever. And I just had that intuitive hit that for this person, and talked to him, made a point of talking, and thought, he loves this. This is a sweat equity for him. So then we asked to come back again. I brought the kids and let him see us. And it was the idea of seeing another family potentially enjoying and living into this that ended up making was more important than the price at the end of the day. And
Wow.
he
Yeah.
picked us over that sort of conglomerate, if you will, for it. So absolutely. I love that. Really great insight.
Well, yeah, I think that it speaks to just the personal aspect, is that many times in negotiations, we think it's like one wall versus the other wall, right? And we forget that it's a person with
Yeah.
another person here. And
Yeah.
sometimes when there's an intermediary in between, it can be difficult too, because you have to make sure that personal effect comes through,
Yes.
right? And understanding that you do have a person on the other side, because I've been guilty myself and just in negotiation of just being like, well, this is the way, right?
Yeah.
And where in
Yeah.
fact, I'm not thinking in that rational part of like, okay, there's a person over here. So if
Yeah.
I go into that way, I'm typically going to limit my opportunities for this to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And we're so conditioned to that approach. I mean, certainly in the practice of law, you spoke to
Yeah.
the bull in the china shop. Everything's about forcing your agenda forward. I think more and more in business, we were seeing that forcing the agenda forward. So
Mm.
this is such a great insight to come up with better opportunities. Well, this has been just such a great conversation. I could go on
Thank
for
you.
ages. I think there's so
Yeah.
much we haven't even tapped that you've got to offer here. So we'll have to do a follow up with you, Jason. I normally
Thank you.
like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had? Doesn't have to be about anything we've talked about. One of those aha moments for you that had you think differently or show up differently.
I heard something recently, and it kind of talked to my part, is that it's okay to not have a reaction or opinion, right?
Mm.
I don't have to constantly react or have an opinion. I could just, okay, like it'd be
Yes.
like, okay, it doesn't have to be like a judgment or that. And it also goes to double-sided, because
Yeah.
I also don't have to take in everybody's opinion, right? If
Yeah.
I want to achieve a goal, right, I can't go take my advice from someone who's never even come close or never tried or never
Yeah.
done it or never done a part. I
Yeah.
can see their feedback and see if it can be useful, but I can truly judge to where my
Yeah.
information comes from.
That is such timely advice right now. Oh my gosh, with everything going on in the world today,
Yeah.
just we've become such a reactive society. And I love that advice that, you don't have to react to everything. You don't have to have and again, as lawyers, oh my gosh, I don't know where it's bred into us that we feel we have to have opinions on every
Yeah.
issue. And so I love that. So where can people learn more about you, Jason?
Sure. Well, thanks so much. It's been a great conversation. You can find more about me, the Live on 100 program, over at jasonyarusi.com. You can also go listen to the Multifamily Live podcast or Live 100 podcast.
Love it. And for our listeners, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. So as I always say, if you're driving, don't panic, just come and check it out. And thank you so much, Jason. This really has been
Thank
a
you.
quite an interesting conversation. We've solved all the problems of the world here, at least kickstarted it. So
That's it. Kickstarter for sure.
and for our listeners, I have no doubt if you were listening at all, you had to get a ton of value from this. I know I did as well. You probably saw me look at the side. I was jotting down little notes myself, some beautiful gems hidden in here. I encourage you to listen to it again, even, and get that next layer deep. And as always, give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with people in your life who can benefit from a perspective shift to help them live their most empowered life as well. And before we sign off today, just want to talk about a couple of ways we can work together. I specialize in teaching both seasoned and early stage attorneys a better way to practice so that you can be more increasingly authentic, a little less battle worn. We all know about that. And ultimately end up being significantly more effective, as well as negotiating a better life for yourself. I'd love the opportunity to help you and or your firm thrive and stand out. And if you think you might be interested, just check it out at practicingwithpurpose.org. You can book a consult or just check out some of the information there. And that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth, find ways that you can practice on purpose, find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle your passion, make a difference in this world, negotiating your best life on your terms. Until next time, take care.